In this final tutorial, we're going to look at the last tab on the spreadsheet. That is the tab down at the bottom here called Specific Project. Let's click on that. What this tab allows you to do is enter the inputs for a given project and see what the return rate multiple needs to be. So we've got quite a few input cells here. We're going to enter the R&D spend rate. We're going to enter the target CAGR. We're entering that as 10%. We've just arbitrarily chosen a lifespan of 12 years. And in this case, we're going to also be calculating the margin adjusted CRRM. So I'm also entering here what is the anticipated margin of this product over its lifetime, and that's put in at 58%. And that's against our ideal lifetime gross margin at 67%. We're also then going to enter the direct spending on the project, and that's deemed to be 1.77. Imagine that as $1.77 million, and that the burden rate is calculated as being 70%. In other words, that is the amount of extra R&D spend that I'm going to need to add to the direct spending on this project, or to account for all of the other overhead costs in R&D that get incurred. You can make that a variable as to what it is you believe for your company or division. In this case, I've set that at 70%, so even though the project on a direct spend basis is costing $1.77 million, the total cost of the project by adding 70% to it is deemed to be $3 million. So with those all in place here, it is using the formula to calculate automatically what the cumulative revenue return multiple needs to be. And that multiple here is, as you can see down here in cell B13, is 10.29. So we need to get a multiple here on this project of 10.29 times 3 million, or approximately $30 million, in order to satisfy the requirement, if you like, of the CRRM. And that's graphed over here, where you can see it's getting to that 30 million or just slightly north of 30 million. But what it is also doing is calculating the margin adjusted CRRM. If we look at the formula for that, it's basically the same as the CRRM multiplied by the fraction B5, which is the ideal gross margin of 67%, divided by the anticipated lifetime gross margin, which in this case is 58. Given that 58 is less than 67, this fraction here is greater than 1, so if I multiply the CRRM by a fraction that's greater than 1, I'm going to get a multiple here that's higher. And indeed, that multiple here is 11.89. So what this basically says is, for this project that has a 12-year lifespan, it needs to get to this number out here, which is 30.75 million of revenue return, to reach the cumulative required revenue multiple that would allow our top line, or our revenue, to grow at a 10% CAGR, given that we plan on spending 17% on R&D each year. However, because the margin is less than our ideal margin of 67, this MACRRM, or margin adjusted CRRM, is now calculated, and that says you really need to reach a multiple here of $35.52 million. If you do that, it will return to you the same amount of margin dollars that would have been achieved had we reached the CRRM, had this project been at the ideal margin of 67. So this is a way of adjusting the return multiple required to account for the fact that the margin is less than what we deem to be our ideal margin. In this particular case, that increases the ultimate cumulative revenue return from 10.29 up to 11.89. And you can see for every year here, post introduction of the product, what we would anticipate that revenue to be given the S-curve. So the question then comes, well, if we are going to strive to reach this MACRRM, or margin adjusted CRRM, if the blue line is capable of growing the top line revenue at exactly 10%, then if I achieve 11.89, that will actually grow the revenue at a higher compound annual growth rate. And we can go back to our prior tab here called CAGR calculation and make that assessment. So remember these numbers, 10.29 and 11.89. If we come back to our CAGR calculator, we have already entered here that it's a 12-year lifespan product. that it's a 17% spend rate on R&D, and that our CRRM is 10.29. And if I solve for that, solve, it should come back with an answer of 10% CAGR, which is what we know it would be. Come back to this one again. This number now on the MACRRM is 11.89. If I now come back to the CAGR calculator and enter 11.89 and hit solve, it tells us that that multiple of return, should we reach it, which is what we do need to reach in this case in order to get back the same number of margin dollars as ideal, that will actually grow the top line or promote a growth of the top line revenue at 13.1% CAGR. So that's how this specific project tab is used. You can enter a given project that you have in mind, whatever its margin is, whatever you think the direct cost is, and the appropriate burden rate to add to that, and see what the revenue return for that project needs to be.